Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Krochmalnek. Together, we'll explore the art of turning tiny seeds into a thriving microgreens empire, sharing insights, coveted secrets, and strategic wisdom from building one of Canada's largest microgreens farms. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations with leading figures in the world of microgreens. On today's episode of the podcast, we are talking all about sunflower microgreens, everything from the best seeds, soil, and lighting to use, how to remove the seed hulls efficiently, why you should grow sunflower microgreens as a beginner or expert, how to safely wash them, and so much more. This is a jam-packed, super valuable episode, and I hope this information helps you on your microgreens journey. Let's get right into it. So the first question you're going to ask yourself is, why should I grow sunflower microgreens? So the main reason is they are highly profitable. So they yield about 600 grams plus per tray, which equates to over $30 in revenue per tray selling direct to consumer. Now, if you're selling to restaurants or wholesale, it'll still be really high and the margins are insane. It's one of the most profitable microgreens you can grow. Another reason to grow them is they're really great in microgreens mixes. So you can sell them on their own, but you can also add them to mixes. So if you're selling products that are not as profitable, like let's say kale or broccoli, you can mix in sunflower microgreens into those products, make a new mix, and then get the value of the higher revenue per tray with the sunflower in those mixes. And lastly, they're quite a popular crop with customers. So especially on the consumer side, so whether it's retail stores or direct to consumer, they're a really popular product that a lot of people that have heard of microgreens have heard of sunflower microgreens because they're one of the most popular products. So those are all great reasons to grow sunflower microgreens, but there's a lot of issues that pop up. And that's why I decided to make this podcast. There's a lot of misinformation on YouTube on the best way to grow sunflower microgreens. And my goal is to give you really high quality information from my 10 years of experience of growing microgreens and sunflower microgreens in particular. So some of the issues that you may run into with production of sunflower microgreens include inconsistent yields from batch to batch, difficulty in removing seed hulls. This is a big one for beginners. It takes so much time to manually remove the seed hulls. So I have some good tips in this podcast on how to actually remove the seed hulls in an efficient way. Flavor differences from batch to batch, which we'll get into when we talk about seed. Seeding rates change from batch to batch. So depending on your environment as well as the seed, you'll find that a lot of people have to adjust the seeding rate from one batch of seed to the next. And lastly, mold growth on the seeds and sunflower shoots is a big problem that people experience. So we're going to touch on all of these issues, and we're actually going to go through pretty much the growing process and all the inputs you need to ensure you have a consistent, high quality sunflower microgreen product that will increase your profitability and the demand for your product as you start or expand your microgreens business. So now the solutions to these problems. So the first one is seed. Seed is so critical when growing sunflower microgreens. Now, all microgreens, you want to have a good quality seed, but with sunflower microgreens in particular, it is critical in having a high quality product. So not all seed is equal, which is something that a lot of people make the assumption when they're starting to grow microgreens is I'm going to find the cheapest seed possible, and that's going to increase my profitability because I'm saving money on this seed. And logically, this makes sense. But in the reality, in my experience growing microgreens, is that cheaping out on these inputs will often cost you a lot more in the long run. So if you buy a poor quality sunflower microgreen seed, you're most likely going to run into all of those issues, if not at least some of them that I just mentioned. So getting a good, consistent source of seed is the key to solve the seed issue problem. So I have two recommendations for seed for sunflower. The first one is Mums. So they're one of the biggest suppliers of microgreen seed in the world. And they sell a ton of sunflower seed, but they often get many different lots of sunflower seed, meaning that they're coming from different countries, different farms, and that can lead to a lot of inconsistency. So in my experience with purchasing from mums for sunflower seeds, you want to look for a lot that's from the US. So the best way to do this is to call them up directly rather than going on their website and purchasing them, and ask them, hey, do you have a USA lot of sunflower seed? That right there will eliminate a pretty substantial amount of potential problems from buying sunflower seeds from mums. So they pretty much get them from USA and Italy. And in my experience, the Italian seed is a lot smaller, and the hulls don't come off as well, and the flavors is a little bit different. So they're both the same type of sunflower seed, which is black oil sunflower seed. So that's the one you want. There's also striped sunflower seeds, but for microgreens, you really want the black oil seeds. So USA lot will save a ton of potential issues over the Italian lot from mums in particular. And now even when you get a USA lot, you still have to test the seed to make sure that it's consistent and it's giving you the yields you want. Because unfortunately with sunflower, the growing environment that it's grown in has such a big impact on how the seeds germinate, their vigor, their flavor, their strength and growth, how the seed hulls come off. So if you start off with a bad seed, it's practically impossible to recover with all the other tips I'm going to give you. So we're starting with seed because it's the most important. And the other source that has a really high quality sunflower seed is Johnny's Select Seeds. And they just in general, their seeds are very, very consistent. So if you decide to find another source that's not mums, Johnny's would be a great option for that. Now, wherever you buy the seed, you do have to do this testing. So when you switch from one lot to the next, that's when you have to do some testing before you actually switch over production. Is that way, if there is any issues that pop up, you can solve them before they become a production problem and that you don't have enough product or the seed hulls are taking forever to take off. So doing that test before you switch to a new lot will save you a lot of headache. So I recommend actually purchasing a larger quantity of seed when you find a good batch of seed for sunflower. And because every lot will be a bit different, buying a larger quantity will actually remove this testing phase, or at least reduce it to make it less frequently. So you buy a larger quantity and it'll save you from going through that process as frequently. So I would recommend once you're established, so if you're a new farm, I'd recommend, or a new microgreen grower, I'd recommend maybe buying 2 to 3 months, and that'll give you a good start. Once you expand and get bigger, I'd recommend buying 6 months to a year's worth of sunflower seed. Now, obviously, if you're just starting out, it doesn't make sense to do that. So you want to wait till you know you have demand for this product, then purchase a good lot when you find one. And a lot of companies will often sell you a sample amount of seed. So from mums, for example, when you call them up, you can ask them, hey, can I get a sample of, just 1 kilogram of this lot? And then you test it. And then you go back after you test it and you're like, hey, I want to buy 200 kilograms of this lot. And then you have it for the period of time that you're growing, hopefully 6 months to a year. And this removes that testing phase, like I said. So this will save you a ton of time in the long run. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is soaking seed. So a lot of growers will soak their sunflower seed. And this is, again, one of the things on YouTube that's just prevalent all across the board is sunflower seeds, you have to soak them. And this is absolutely not true at all. So I haven't soaked sunflower seeds in, I don't know, maybe 8 years or something. So pretty early on, I realized, why am I doing this? And the reason was because someone on YouTube told me to do it. And then it just kind of perpetuates the misinformation. So you don't actually have to soak sunflower seed. Yes, soaking it will give it a head start and will make it slightly less likely that mold will form on the seed because there's one less day it's in contact with the soil. But a really great way to prevent mold with sunflower microgreens is to use a fine grade of vermiculite on top of the seed. And that will make a huge difference in reducing the amount of mold that forms on sunflower microgreens. Also, like I mentioned earlier, a good quality seed will form much less more mold than cut. Also, good quality seed will form much less mold than poor quality seed. So a good indicator of the quality of your seed can be how much mold forms. There's many other factors, but if you have a batch of seed that you plant and it's just overtaken with mold, it's probably a starting sign that the seed is not that good quality. Now, mold is pretty common in the first few days of germination with sunflower seeds. So if you see a small amount of mold on the seed hulls on day 1 to 3, I honestly wouldn't worry too much about it. That's pretty common. And the main thing you want to avoid is having mold grow up the stems of sunflower or having like a big canopy of mold form over the whole top layer of the soil. If there's just a little bit of mold, by the time you uncover it, that mold will likely die once it gets airflow. So it's really because of a lack of airflow that you're going to have a little bit of mold. And sunflowers just naturally more prone to it. But putting that vermiculite on top will get rid of like at least 80 to 90% of that mold forming during germination. So really good tip for those that are growing sunflower and seeing a lot of mold is use a fine grade of vermiculite on top of it, and try growing without soaking it. So seed how you would normally seed it. And I recommend between roughly 110 and 150 grams per tray. Now you can get away with, some people do more than that. I generally don't recommend that. I found that within the decade I've been growing sunflower microgreens, that would be the range that, depending on the seed lot that you may have to seed with, but about 130 is on average what I've experienced is the right amount of seed. Now, if you're getting a really small seed, that may be different. And if you're getting the striped seed, you're probably going to need more seed because there's less of them per tray. But if you're getting a decent sized black oil sunflower seed from Mums or Johnny's, then roughly 130 grams will be what will give you the best results for seeding. Now we're going to talk about soil. So using ProMix HP or MP with Gaia Green will be a great starting soil to grow sunflower microgreens. So ProMix HP, for those that don't know, is the non-organic version of the potting soil that ProMix sells, and it's a great soil. And then MP is the organic version, so it's approved for organic production. So depending on the type of growing setup you want to have, whether it's organic or non-organic, you can use one or the other. And they're both great soils to use. Now, using the Gaia Green with sunflower in particular is not required. So a lot of crops like broccoli or kale, basil, if you don't use Gaia Green, in my opinion, or you don't use some sort of fertilizer, you're not going to have really good results. With sunflower, because the seeds are so big, they actually have quite a bit of the nutrition they need to get to the first stage of growth. And a lot of people on the internet kind of say that, oh, like you don't need fertilizer for microgreens because they have what they need in their seed. And yes, that's true up to a certain point. They can survive with what they have, but they can't always thrive. And there's a big difference between surviving and thriving. And ideally, I would want my plants to thrive because they're going to have more nutrition, better flavor, better shelf life than if you're just focusing on producing something that will just grow to the bare minimum. And not using fertilizer, in my opinion, for microgreens is putting the bare minimum because the plant is what it absorbs from the soil. So if you just have a minimum amount of nutrients in the seed and in the soil, you're not going to really get a high quality crop. The other thing I want to touch on with soil is a lot of people want to grow microgreens hydroponically. It sounds so picturesque to be able to grow microgreens hydroponically. It's the same idea as aquaponics, where in theory, it seems like this perfect system of balance and equilibrium of fish and plants. And the truth is, in my experience, it's not that at all. You're trying to replicate nature, and replicating nature is extremely difficult. We don't have, as humans, enough information yet and knowledge to do that successfully. So whenever we try to do that, it usually ends in failure. And that's why most aquaponics farms don't, if they are been around for a while, they don't exist anymore because it's extremely difficult to replicate nature and do it in an economical way. So back to microgreens growing hydroponically, I really don't recommend that, especially for sunflower, because the soil is critical for crops like sunflower, beets, things where you want the hulls to really pop off. So if you grow sunflower hydroponically, which I recommend you try doing it just if you would like to try it, is that a lot of the seed hulls won't actually pop off and the yield will be a lot more inconsistent. So when you're growing something hydroponically, you're feeding the nutrient. If you are feeding nutrients, you're feeding them through the roots directly. So you're giving the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, etc., directly in the roots. And in my experience, I've seen there is a very strong symbiosis between bacteria, fungus, and plants or plant roots that gives them a lot of vigor and strength. So there's a lot of early research on this, but in my experience, having soil for especially for crops like sunflower will give you a lot more vigor and strength for the plants to pop off their seed hulls. And the quality of the soil and the strength of the light gives that energy to the plant to actually remove the seed hulls. So if you're seeing that you're growing sunflower microgreens and the hulls are just not popping off, they're just sticking to the plant, there's a few factors. It could be, of course, the seed, then there's the soil, and then the last one is lighting, which is what we're going to talk about now. So a lot of growers like to use 1 or 2 grow lights per growing level. This is super common, but in my experience, using 3 grow lights per growing level gives the correct amount of light to microgreens. For sunflower, if you use 3 lights instead of 1 or 2, you'll not only get a better quality microgreen, but it'll significantly increase the amount of seed hulls that will pop off naturally. And you need to remember that light is the main energy source for plants. So if you don't give sufficient quantities, the plants can't really grow as well or taste as good. And again, I encourage you to experiment. So if you are currently growing with 1 or 2 grow lights in your setup, switch to 3 or add a level that has 3. Grow the crop, all the crops you grow from 1 to 2 lights to 3, and you will see a significant amount of difference, not just in seed hulls for things like sunflower, but you'll also see the quality, the leaf size, the speed of growth, the flavor, and the thickness of the leaves will all improve. And if you just think about it logically, if you're growing with 1 grow light and then you switch to 3, you're giving the plant 3 times the amount of light. So plants literally live off of light. That's their main energy source. So the more you give of it to a certain extent, the more the plants have energy to grow. All other things being equal. So obviously, if there's no nutrition in the soil, you can give it all the light it wants, and it won't really grow. And a great example of this for those that have gardened before is if you ever watch like a zucchini plant, and it's not really growing, and then all of a sudden you get a big rainstorm, and overnight it's like 20% bigger. It's this concept, I call it the weakest link. So if you have a chain of factors that affect the growth of a plant, and you have, let's say, light, water, humidity, temperature, nutrition in the soil, let's just start with those. And you have everything the plant needs. So it's the middle of the summer, there's tons of light, the temperature and humidity are great, there's tons of nutrition in the soil, but the plant's not getting any water. The plant can't grow because of that limiting factor or the weakest link, which is water. So once it gets that water, then it reaches its full genetic potential and can grow at the maximum speed. So when you're growing microgreens, it's important to kind of have this methodology where you try to see, okay, what in my production system is the weakest link? Is it my soil? Is it my lighting? Is it the seed? Is it the temperature, humidity? And try to optimize for all of them until you don't have any weakest links. And just a side note, this model is super, super helpful, not just for growing, but also even running your business. So if you think about, you have all these different, areas of business. You have accounting, you have finance, you have production, you have human resources. If you just figure out like, hey, where is my weakest link in that? So I got production dialed in. So production is fine. I don't really know how to do accounting or how to see what crops are profitable. Then that might be your weakest link. If you don't know how to hire people or how to manage people, that might be your weakest link. So you really want to find out what that is and minimize that or improve that area of your business. And you'll find that the speed of growth of your business and the profitability and success will increase dramatically by finding what the weakest link is, focusing your energy there and improving it until it's not the weakest link, and then going to the next thing and continue that process until you don't have any major weakest links, and then your business will be absolutely thriving by that point. So the next thing we're going to talk about is harvest. So harvesting is an important part And the biggest thing I would say with harvesting is a lot of people go simply for getting maximum yield. And that's great from a profitability perspective and a pure business perspective. But you have to consider you're selling a product that people consume. So if your stem lengths are like super long and your leaf is really small, you're pretty much selling plant noodles. You're not really selling microgreens. And I see this all too common, is people are like, oh yeah, I got 800 grams on sunflower microgreens, and kind of focusing just on yield. And that's great that you're able to get that kind of high yield, but having a high quality product will do you much more service in the long run than having the highest yield. So if you have the highest yield and you have a subpar quality product, you're selling a product that people are consuming. So if someone consumes that product and then they're like, oh, wasn't that good, they're less likely to buy it. So while yes, you could have higher yield, you are sacrificing your customers' experience and potential repeat purchases. So you want to find a good balance between stem length and leaf size. And a great way, just a simple way to kind of get a sense of what is a good size leaf to stem ratio, is if you go to Johnny Seed's website and just type in, microgreens, you'll get, or whatever microgreen you want, cilantro microgreens, basil microgreens, and you get a sense of what a good stem to leaf ratio is in their pictures, because their pictures are a really good indicator of what is a good length for those products. So if you just search up sunflower microgreens, you'll get a good sense of what a good stem to leaf ratio is. And I think this is so critical. And again, something that is not really talked about much is the aesthetic of microgreens. And while aesthetic is not everything, it's a really important part of the consumer purchasing process. So like I said, if you're selling sunflower noodles instead of sunflower microgreens, people are less likely to repurchase it. And all the nutrition is actually, or most of the nutrition is actually in the leaf, not the stem. So you're selling also a less nutritious product. So you want to find that good ratio of stem length to leaf. That's the first thing. Second, sunflower will generally take 3 days on average to germinate and will be under lights for 4 to 7 days, for a total of roughly 10 days from seed to harvest at max. But I generally find most growers can use a 7 to 8 day grow cycle for sunflower, as long as their temperatures are above 70 Fahrenheit for growing. And the best way to harvest sunflower shoots, if you don't have a quick cut greens harvester, is by hand. You would cut them the same way you would any other microgreen. So to harvest them efficiently, I wouldn't spend any time removing the hulls until the washing phase, because there will be some soil or vermiculite residue on the cut greens, but this is okay because it'll be removed during the washing phase. So a lot of information on YouTube says use humidity domes, or to kind of brush the top layer of the sunflower microgreens. And yes, these things do help to get the hulls to come off, but you're talking about a small percentage compared to what I'm going to talk about in the next step, which is washing. So when washing your sunflower microgreens, once they're cut, they're ready to wash. So I recommend using 2 small Rubbermaid totes as double sinks to wash them. So you can use your kitchen sink, but I really don't recommend it, as it may be contaminated and is a food safety risk. So as an example, if you're handling raw chicken around your kitchen sink, it may be contaminated with E. coli or salmonella. So using separate dedicated Rubbermaid totes just makes a lot more sense and just eliminates the food safety risk of using your kitchen sink. And they're pretty cheap. You can buy Rubbermaid totes from Walmart or Home Depot for $10 or less a bin. So pretty inexpensive. So to start the washing process, you want to fill the Rubbermaid totes with water about halfway. Just tap water is fine. Cold water is best. You don't want to use warm water. So just tap cold water. Add some of the sunnies to the first tote. You'll want to agitate the greens. So you put a bit of greens in the tote and then you kind of just shake them up, and that'll kind of remove the dirt and the hulls. So the majority of the hulls will come off with this agitation. So you just need to kind of spin them and shake them a bit in the water. The hulls are actually lighter than the water, so it's very convenient. They'll float to the top, and you can just use a strainer to remove the hulls into your compost bin or your garbage. And once the majority of the hulls are removed, you would transfer the greens from the first tote to the second tote and repeat the process of agitating and straining out any of the hulls. After this two-step washing process, the vast majority of hulls will be removed and the greens are now clean and ready to dry. Now, if you have a small amount of sunflower hulls left, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The main point of this is to get rid of like 95% of them. If there's, one or two hulls per clamshell, you're not going to find that customers are going to be complaining about that. But if there's 20, 30 hulls per clamshell, that's when you're going to start having more issues. So you don't want to strive for perfection here. You want to strive for, the Pareto principle of 80-20, if not maybe 90-10. And then to dry the sunflower microgreens, because they're going to be wet being in the water, you can literally use any salad spinner will do the trick to dry the sunflower microgreens. So you put in a few handfuls in the salad spinner, just give it a strong spin, and then they'll be ready to package. So the last step in the sunflower microgreens growing process is packaging the greens. So once they're dry, you can package them either individually, or as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you can mix them with other greens to make a variety of mixes. And since sunflower shoots are so profitable, they will enhance the profitability of literally any microgreen mix. So there's so many great ideas for microgreens. You can have a market mix, immunity blend, rainbow mix, crunchy mix. There's so many great marketing opportunities for microgreens mixes, and they're often the most popular products is the mixes. So because you have sunflower and it's such a profitable product on its own, and then you are putting them in mixes, which are some of the most profitable and most popular products, you have just a great win-win scenario. And if you keep this information on hand when you're growing the sunflower microgreens, you'll have much more success, much more profitability, and it will make your life so much easier growing sunflower microgreens. So I highly recommend saving this podcast for the future and keeping it on hand and listening through a few times, because there's a lot of gold nuggets in here that will make your experience so much better in growing sunflower microgreens, making your life easier and making you a better farmer in the process. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Feel free to check out our website for more information on all sorts of different growing tips and tricks. And that's microgreensconsulting.com. And thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. To access a wealth of insights, just click the subscribe button, stay notified about each new episode, and enjoy all of this wisdom for free. If you're ready to supercharge your microgreens business, visit microgreensconsulting.com for a gold mine of guides and resources. We've transformed thousands of microgreens businesses, and you're invited to join the success story. Let's stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Microgreens Consulting for exclusive content and expert tips and wisdom. If you found this episode insightful, please leave us a review, spread the word, and let's share microgreens magic with the world. Until next time, let curiosity fuel your growth, and may happiness be your harvest. Happy growing, everyone.